A lovely afternoon to you. It's 5 minutes gone past the 12 o'clock hour, and this is WFM 91.7 Women Radio. My name is Chinyere Timothy Crown. Today is Democracy Day, and it's been a lot of reflection. We've had mixed feelings today, basically, and we're having a round table, I would say, discussion with a lot of experts that will be x-raying and throwing light on the postmortem on democracy. I don't know why I feel so emotional about today. Rose is really, telling me, patting me on the back, not to be too emotional, but I don't know, but I'm just really emotional about today, about our journey as a country, and how we got here and how things can really get better. But that's from the basis of our discourse this afternoon. And as I said earlier, we have a lot of experts that have been drawn from different fields that will be talking to us extensively about what our democracy actually represents on the show today. All right, so June 12 every year is a day set aside to celebrate the birth of democracy in Nigeria. Without a doubt, Nigeria has experienced several democratic transitions since 1999. However, the question remains on every lip as Nigerians, are we truly enjoying the full benefits of democracy? Although democratic governance has allowed for increased political participation and the establishment of institutions that promote the rule of law, human rights and accountability, Nigeria still faces challenges that hinder its democratic growth. Despite these challenges, there are reasons to be optimistic about Nigeria's democratic future. And to this end, in commemoration of this year's Democracy Day, we'll be discussing Nigeria and democracy. Are we enjoying its full benefit? My name is Chinyere Timothy Crown, and I have my panelists who are leaders of thought and authorities in different sectors. We have Shola Fagorusi, is the Executive Director, One Life Initiative; Tanwa Ashiru, CEO, Bulwark Intelligence Solutions; Dr. Jide Johnson, Director, Special Program, Nigerian Institute of Journalism; Sumbo Oladipo, Social and Public Affairs Analyst. We also have Jonathan Ikeolumba. He's the founder, Office Load Consulting, Finance and Strategy Consultant. We'll be, picking their brains on democracy, post-mortem, and also progressively, how have we fared as a country? That will be the conversation today on the program. Do well to tell your friends to tune in and let us have this conversation together. There's usually strong rationale for postmortems, at least to find out what went wrong, how it went wrong, and who was responsible, for all that. And that's what we shall be kicking off with this afternoon. So let's quickly join our panelists this morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great. All right, so without further ado, we'll kick off with the first question. The issues of insecurity in Nigeria has not only become something of grave concern to every well-meaning Nigeria, but has also become a recurring phenomenon that threatens the well-being of the citizens. How would you score Nigeria in the area of security over the years, given that we've had to deal with, the issue of insecurity? Past administrations have attempted to see how they can nip it in the bud, but we are acutely aware that every other component of a country is hinged on security. If we don't have security, it affects every other sectors. So I'll go straight to Tanwa Ashiru now with that question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for that. And, you're absolutely right. Looking at the security situation over the last 8 years, Nigeria has been through quite a lot. I know we did an analysis recently, and we saw that there had been an exponential increase in insecurity and security incidents, which is specifically attacks on civilians in the last 5 years or so, so starting from 2019 to 2022, it was just a continuous, significant incline and increase. So absolutely, I think everyone's feeling the pinch. When the previous administration came in, the security challenges were pretty isolated in the Northeast, sort of in the Niger Delta as well. But as the years have gone by, we've seen it spread not just across the Northeast. We're seeing insecurity in the Northwest as well. The border challenges are now catching up to us. The banditry that they can't seem to curb. Also, a lot of attacks in the Middle Belt, which is the food basket of the nation, and also then because of that, we're dealing with challenges with food security and increased costs of living and so on. So it really has been a major challenge, and I think going into this new administration, all eyes are on the administration to figure out what is their plan for security. How are they going to stem the tide of this? How are we going to, steer the nation back? One of the things that I know keeps me up every night, and one thing I'm really concerned about, is with the school and the youth of Nigeria. Now, recently I saw a video of some of the bandits that are operating across the Northwest in the forest. These are very young kids. They're 13, 12, 13-year olds carrying AK-47s, riding on motorcycles and just doing whatever it is that they want. And I do feel that Nigeria over the years has failed its youth. And so now you're seeing these young, kids who were just left abandoned on the road, Almajiris, etc. Now they're grown to teenagers, they have access to weapons, and they don't care. There's zero morals, and they're going to do whatever they want. So there's a lot that we have to do in terms of, as a society, what the government has to do in the non-kinetic, which is non-violent means of stemming the security issue, or insecurity issue rather. There's still a lot that we're going to have to do in that area.
All right, so Tanwa, there is a brutal put down on the recent on the new administration, right? Because it's been viewed maybe from a primordial prism that this is an extension of the Buhari's administration, maybe because of the umbrella of APC, right? We saw that Buhari attempted to work on security. I'm talking to you because specifically I would like you as an expert to advise the subsisting government. If you were to speak to the new president, what would you tell him in terms of what measures to adopt, what components to put together to ensure that security, because security, in my opinion, is a responsibility of everyone, not necessarily the security apparatus, right? So if you were to speak to this government in terms of being a consultant, what would you tell them? What measures should they adopt? Because it's beginning to look like, people who are responsible for insecurity, I mean, people who are feeling insecurity are people at the helm, meaning that we've seen where UAE released a list of people who are contributing, who are sponsoring insecurity in Nigeria, and nothing was done, or nothing has been done to that up until now. So if you were to advise government, what would you tell them to adopt as a step-by-step approach to handling insecurity in Nigeria?
Okay, so I think at this crucial point, one of the first things that I want to say is the need to ensure that the president hires the right people. Now, we've always suffered from this challenge of putting the square pegs in round holes, which is you keep putting people in places where they have zero capacity to run those agents, run those places, and that is why we don't see the results we're looking for. So while they're still in the middle of deliberating on who it is that they're going to make as the DG of whatever agency or as the chief of whatever service, it's very important that they are choosing the right people who have clear strategies, proven track record, both in leadership and in the ability to see things to finish, ensure that the general objectives are met. So that's one of the very first things. You'll be surprised when they put in the right person who knows exactly how to get his team gingered, knows exactly which strategies to use to see results. We're definitely going to see things change. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'm also going to say is the difference between the Buhari administration, I think, and the Tinubu administration so far. There is a huge difference already. We're just seeing a lot of action. I don't know if you remember, I know when President Buhari initially took office, things were just really slow. There was no traction.
Mm-hmm.
The excitement that we had as a people really went down. Whereas here, we've seen the president already call the service chiefs. It was one of his first agenda. called the service chiefs, called the heads of all the intelligence agencies, and said, listen, guys, it's important that we speak together and we work together towards Nigeria. The second group of people who also spoke to were the traditional rulers, and the role that they play in ensuring that there is adequate security within communities at the community level is also very crucial. So I think the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has already showed some form of leadership and willingness. And willingness has always been a challenge. We always say that when we give intel to the leader saying there's a challenge, Chibok girls are located here, sometimes the willingness in the leadership is lacking. I think so far the current president is showing us that he is willing to make those tough decisions. And I think that might be the key difference here. And finally, another thing as well is that I believe he's showing some strength in diplomacy. I think prior to the president even coming in, what we had heard about him was he had the ability to bring all parties to the table and get people to agree to certain things that they ordinarily wouldn't. So if he's able to use that diplomacy, we might actually see some of these non-state actors, some of these violent actors, be able to bring them to the table, because at the end of the day, carrot and stick, while you're using the military and guns and bombs, at the end of the day, you still need to dialogue with people, get people to sit down, get people to drop their weapons, and and actually go towards a common cause. So if they can put that diplomacy, which is increase their non-kinetic, which is their non-violent means of bringing security to the country, we're definitely going to see some huge progress in that area. But so far, he seems to be on the right track, engaging the right people, showing leadership and speaking to security leaders, speaking to traditional leaders, and people stakeholders really, who would otherwise be responsible for turning things upside down. He seems to be taking charge, and that's something to be hopeful about.
Thank you so much, Tanwa, for that great perspective. This is WFM 91.7 Women Radio and It's Democracy. We are having a round panel discussion with experts drawn from different thoughts. Numbers to send your text to 070-317-56537. I'll take the number again, 070-317-56537. All right, the next question is directed to Jonathan. Reports have shown that Nigeria now has the 11th highest food inflation rate in the world. Nigerians are groaning and lamenting daily as a result of the continuous increase in prices of products and services. Jonathan, taking a quick look at the current state of the economy, would you say that Nigerians are enjoying the benefits of democracy? Hello, Jonathan, are you there? Hello, Jonathan, can you hear me? Hello? All right, so let's direct the question straight to Jide Johnson. Looking at the inflation rate in Nigeria, looking at the misery index, and a lot of data that is coming up saying how the inflation has soared, do you think we are truly reaping the benefits of democracy?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. I thought that was a network glitch. I said, first of all, I thought it was a privilege to have been invited to this conversation on democracy. And if I heard you, because I lost you for a minute, I thought you spoke about, are we reaping the dividends of the democracy? I don't know if that was the question you posed to me, so I know if I can proceed with answering that.
Okay, so I'll have to take the question again. Yeah, so I said recent data has shown that Nigeria has the 11th highest food inflation rate in the world. Nigerians are groaning and lamenting daily as a result of the continuous increase in prices of products and services. We also saw recently that the current administration has, crystallized the removal of fuel subsidy, and the impact is really harsh on the citizens of Nigeria. Would you, in your opinion or your stance, do you think we're reaping the benefits of democracy?
Okay, I think that's a very multidimensional question. If you ask me if we're reaping the rewards of democracy, because we can look at it from multiple perspectives, but I'll try to speak to what an average man out there on the street might look at it. The reality is that if I look at our democracy and just looking at, I mean, starting from the Fourth Republic, just looking over the last 23 years, where we've had about 4 presidents, and just looking at each of the administration vis-a-vis some of the economic policy that will trickle down to reaping the rewards of democracy. I think that one of the things that clearly the numbers do tell us is that in the last 8 years, which is the Buhari's regime, we've had the highest rate of inflation. In fact, I think that even looking at the numbers as at the end of last month, also dovetailing in 2 weeks, we are doing around 22.2%. If I look at it, vis-a-vis the previous leaderships we've had since we returned to democracy in 1999, the numbers in the first 8 years for Obasanjo looked something around, it started at 8.2, but we ended at about 4.64. If I look at the numbers that we had for Yaradua, started at 4.64 where Obasanjo left it. We ended at 15.04. Jonathan actually took it 15.04, but brought it down to 9%. When Buhari came in 2015, it was 9 to 22.2. And so obviously, general inflation really is high. I think that anybody on the street could tell, and it's reflected in the general price of goods and products and services that you find. And specifically, you also spoke about food inflation in itself, which is also another variant of the sort of inflation numbers we are seeing. And there's volatility generally in that space, and there are lots of reasons for that, whether it's related to the insecurity that you find in some parts of the country that has impacted also the prices of some of the agricultural products that we do have. But I think the point to be made is that inflation is quite high in Nigeria. Even just trending it over the last 23 years, my trend was showing me numbers around 12.2%. So I think it's quite high. If that is a reflection, or if that's a way to say, are we enjoying the rewards of democracy? I wouldn't say so. But what I think is that there are broader issues that might be responsible for that. So sometimes it's also good to look at this in perspectives. Let's be optimistic, to be honest. I think the last person who spoke about this government wanting to make very bold and difficult choices. I think that if we would reset the button, those sort of choices will have to be made. There's some sort of feeling that we perhaps might have somebody who wants to make those tough choices, but it remains to be seen. But to give you a direct response to your question, the numbers don't lie, and the numbers clearly is that inflation is quite high, whether it's general inflation, food inflation, or core inflation. I think that the numbers are quite high, and that's the reality on the ground.
All right, so Jonathan, most times we tend to talk and talk and talk, but we don't, walk the talk. Give us a dispassionate autopsy in hindsight. What do you think that the Buhari's administration didn't do right in terms of, helping the economy to be more robust? Are there areas that you think that the Buhari's administration should have worked on specifically to on that chat, the world chat, we get out of it completely?
Okay. I would also, just like you've mentioned, I would also put it in perspective. So I think that there were a lot of things that they did. There were progress around infrastructure development. There were a couple of things that they did, even in terms of even policies, just leaving it at the level of drafting a policy. But I think for me, the biggest one that sort of summarizes most of the issues was really around, I would call it, one is stakeholder management, just getting every stakeholder involved, and just seeing how the implementation of these things could be felt, across different stakeholders. But I think there are some very big ones where we felt they didn't get it right. One of them, obviously, is the FX issue we had that led to multiplicity of different FX rates. I think that there was also a debt or an absence of foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investment, as the case may be. And I thought that in itself too also sort of was responsible for the multiple exchange rates that we saw with that regime, which this new president has made in his inaugural speech, that he really wants to tackle that. So I think that was a very big one that we could see the ripple effect, and there was arbitraging all over. the place. And I thought that in itself was also one of the reasons how things escalated if you looked at it from the perspective of reaping the reward. So I thought that was for me a very big one. Also, I'm sure everyone agrees that towards the twilight of the Buhari's regime as well, too, the Naira redesign policy in itself, too, I thought that sort of exacerbated all the economic issues that we're having. I thought personally that was needless, and I thought if I look at some of those things I've mentioned, the FX management of the issues, and also there were some macro issues out of his control, but not to make a defense for him. I thought that on that particular policy alone, the way the FX rate was managed, I thought we could have done better with that.
Great perspectives there. 25 minutes gone past the hour of 12, and this is WFM 91.7 is Democracy Day, and we're having a roundtable discussion, speaking to experts from different fields to have a proper perspective as to where we are as a country. Nigeria's democracy has been fragile and fluctuating since independence. Successive governments have struggled to create a sense of national unity in a complex country whose borders were drawn by British colonialists, incorporating more than 200 ethnic groups, and that's what forms the narrative of the discussion today. We have brilliant minds speaking to them, and also speaking to us as to how, not just the challenges, but how we can think productively and progressively. We are not going to look at the educational sector, and we are directing this question to Dr. Jide Johnson. The educational sector has suffered a lot of setbacks. The Academic Staff Union of Universities has had a lot of back and forth with the government. The last strike lasted about 8 months. The Minister for Education, Malam Adamu Adamu, admitted that when the former President Muhammadu Buhari appointed him in 2015, he had no prior experience in the field. Can we say this is one of the educational systems? This is one of the reasons why it suffers setback. We heard Tanwa say that, one of the gangrenes in our polity is that these politicians tend to patronize their friends as against bringing experts on board. They tend to appoint people based on friendship or based on their political permutations. Mr. Jide Johnson, would you give us your 2 cents on how Nigeria can be expunged from the quagmire that our educational system is currently immersed in? Jide Johnson, can you hear us? Hello, Jide Johnson. Can you unmute your mic? Hello?
Me.
Yes, we can hear you
hear
now.
me?
Yes, please go ahead. Did you get the question?
Okay. Yeah, I got your question with respect to putting the right people in the right place. Well, with respect to education, you captured it in your closing argument in your question,
All right.
stating the fact that the former Minister of Education himself admitted that he knew next to nothing about the educational sector, and then he was made Minister of Education for 8 years. And that itself resulted in the caricature manner in which the educational sector was managed, particularly at the tertiary level, with respect to the incessant strike that we have with ASU. Just about last week or 2 weeks ago, you recall that the Ministry of Labour got a judgment with no work, no pay, and that means that particular issue there's no end in sight with respect to us resolving the issue in the educational sector. My hope is that the present administration will appoint the right people in the right place, put people that have expertise, knowledge, and experience in various sectors of the economy to manage the economy, to manage education, to manage the critical sector for the development of our nation. Don't forget that the educational sector is the creative and innovative sector of the economy. So if you make the right investment and you put the right people and you come up with the right policies, then you'll be able to generate the human resource that is required to develop your economy. So hopefully President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will appoint the right people, and he will not make the mistake of that the Buhari administration made.
Hello, Jide. Can you hear us? Are you there?
the necessary, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Where they lack the necessary capacity to manage. Where they lack the necessary capacity to manage. So, and then there's the need for government to have a rethink. A rethink in the sense that can we continue to fund education the way we have been funding it in the light of dwindling resources? Or can we continue to create new institutions when the existing institutions lack the requisite resources and the personnel and equipment for them to contribute to the economy? So these are the tough questions that the new administration needs to take, because we can't, the resources are no longer there for us, for government alone to manage the educational sector. So there is the need for government-private intervention by well-meaning Nigerians, by corporate organization, and probably government could give them tax release or one or different types of incentives. For example, if Dangote, if Chevron, MTN, all these multinational corporations, either indigenous or foreign direct investment in Nigeria, make decisive investment in education, are there incentives in which we are going to give to them so as to relieve government the burden, and government can divest whatever resources that they have been using for education to other sector of the economy? These are critical sections. These are critical decisions that we need to take moving forward. The era of government alone funding the educational sector is gone. There are a lot of sectors competing for attention, and that itself is very, very important. Is there the need for us to create an educational bank, for example, where students can access loan and they can pay this loan over a period of 25 years or a period of 35 years when they start to work, like you have in the United States of America? Mm-hmm. It was when Obama became president, that was when he took steps to pay up his student loan. So we need all of those type of policies in order for us to move the educational sector forward. Because if we get the educational sector right, then we'll get every other sector right. Because the educational sector is the sector that provides the human resource for all other sectors of the economy.
Absolutely, Mr. Judy Johnson. But some persons might have a dissenting prism from your postulations, because we saw that the immediate past administration took little leaps to to closing up with the UNESCO benchmark for education. Buhari at some point increased the budget earmark for education. Didn't you in your stance, didn't you think that was a step in the right direction, and would you advise this current administration to maintain that tempo? Hello, Judy Johnson.
Well, yeah, I'm with you.
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you.
Well, there is usually a step that's a step in the right direction. But can we do better? Well, there's need for us to do much more than we have done with respect to that. Making the UNESCO benchmark is just the minimum standard. Can we take it further? Now, I ask you to take a visit, to send one of your reporters to go across the campuses, and for you
we are losing with Judy Johnson,
to look at the infrastructural condition with which we teach our students, and the resources, the equipment, the minimum benchmark. Doesn't mean the minimum benchmark required. What we are saying is that we must make serious investment in the educational sector for us to really grow our economy, because that is the convertible resource that used to convert every other sector of the economy.
All right, so this is Women Radio WFM 91.7, and we are having a round table discussion today, Democracy Day. We are looking at, a cross-section of sectors in Nigeria and employing expert perspectives to these sectors, and, giving a proper X-ray to these issues and how we can, somebody said if we have to fail as a country, we have to fail forward. So how we can fail forward, I would like to adopt that statement, how we can fail forward as a country, not just to hinge on the challenges and the mistakes that we have made, but how can we better the country in all spectrum of it. My name is Chinwe Timothy Crown, and is 26 minutes to the hour of 1. I shall be having this conversation going forward, but let's look at another angle to this now. The Minister for Education, Malam Adamu, admitted that he is not competent. Mr. Johnson, this is still for you. that he's not competent, to addressing the issues of education. Let's look at the out of school children, and that's why I'm asking you, because we have a new system now, and because government is a continuum, but sometimes when we have new people in administration, I mean new leaders, they tend to bring in their own people, which means Tinubu will still bring in his own person, right? But let's focus on the out of school children. What measures would you advise the current government to adopt to ensure that we get our children off the streets? Judy, can you hear me? Please unmute your mic, sir. All right, so let's go over to Shola now. Shola, are you there?
Okay, sorry, I lost the network briefly. If you could just recap the question.
Okay, so I was asking, right? The focus is on out of school children. To bring about notable changes in the educational sector and to reduce the number of out of school children, what should this administration do differently to ensure every child get what they deserve?
Okay, thanks for having me, lend my voice to this conversation. So again, the first thing very clearly has to be that this is of interest to the government. This is something that the government is excited and interested in doing. If you look at the entire landscape as well, if you look at some of the problems, we're having today, the problems around insecurity, one of the questions, I always like to put on the table is that, look, if you look at the northern part of the country, where are the Almajiris of the 1980s? Where are the Almajiris of the 1970s, the Almajiris of the 1990s? They're somewhere, they're doing something, right? If you look at why, we also have several of our governments at the state level, at the local government level, not interested in funding core education, not interested in solving the problem of education. Again, you begin to look at it from the dimension of how expensive it is in terms of the human capital development. So we're not just talking about buildings. We're not just talking about putting playgrounds there. We're talking about the various, the various items, the various policies, the various regulations that need to be put in place to make sure that the girl child, the boy child does not just, go to school, but we're also talking about retention. As it is right now, one of the things we always say in the space is that, look, a child in a bad school is better than a child not in any form of school at all. But that's not good enough. But again, that's us looking at it based on our own reality. Some of the things that government will need to do to actually get children back in school. One of them is that learning should actually be made more interesting. Outside classroom opportunities have to be made available for various young people. Outside classroom opportunities have to be made available for children there. It shouldn't just be about classroom learning. Again, in terms of facility as well, you also want to talk about the fact that schools have to be safe. Several of our secondary schools, several of our public, schools, primary schools do not have school perimeters. The school perimeters, rather, are not fenced, right? So we're talking about the safety of several of these, infrastructure. So it's not enough for government to say, look, we'll build schools, but you're saying that, look, what is the quality also of the facilities you have in place? How protected are those things you have in place? Sometimes we go to some of these schools and you see the computer lab locked, the computers themselves dusty. It's not enough to just say that those things are there. Again, you also want to talk about how affordable this is. Several times you get into states and the government is saying that education is actually free in our state. But by the time you begin to factor quite a number of things that students themselves have to, get, you have to talk about textbooks. Now we're reading in the news, Edo State government is asking students to, come to school, I think twice or thrice, just because, again, you're talking about transportation. But prior to this time as well, students needed to go through, public transportation means to their various, places of learning. So we're saying that how do you ensure that placement of students in schools is such that, the government is sensitive to students being in schools close to their home or close to their parents' workplace. The needs of schools also need to be made public. This is not the time where state government, local government, even the federal government cover up whatever the challenge is. That intervention from the private sector is actually very important. And that can only happen if the government, again, document some of these needs, some of the things they are struggling with, and also make these things, available to the public. The quality of education, again, is another thing you want to look at. The quality of training for teachers, what capacity do these teachers have? Now we're talking about the democratization of technology within the country. The fact that you can actually use several of these technological tools to actually bridge, several of the gaps we have. How are we taking advantage of this in a way that, the student in a rural community is as better placed as a student in the urban community? We also still have that attitude of parents. You have that far down people saying that, look, what exactly is the benefit of school if you have to go through all of that and still have to come in, and then you're talking about looking for a job and all of that. So there's still a need for, major sensitization, trying to get parents and guardians understand why their children, why their wards actually need to go to school. And for the teachers as well, again, we need to begin to look at what model is sustainable to ensure that teachers are properly remunerated. Do we want to remunerate teachers in rural communities better than those in urban communities and provide some sense of incentive? Do we want to look at how we rejig the child rights law again and make it compulsory such that, children can actually go to school? Do we want to consider exchange programs for teachers and make, a very professional, career out of the teaching, profession itself, such that people begin to say, look, I'm aspiring to become a primary school teacher, I'm aspiring to become a secondary school teacher. Again, you also want to look at the other things that also happens to the child within the school. Do we have enough counselors within the school as well? Do they have designated offices? And it's not just about titles. The children finding the school as a safe space where they can actually complain about the various challenges they also have at home. So I think there's a lot, going on out there.
Actually.
Like the other speaker also mentioned, there is that very call need to find individuals who understand the depth of this problem. The former Minister of Education talked about expunging, sexuality education out of the curriculum of the school. And for several of us, that was a misstep, to say that, look, these are realities happening. We've had cases where you get into schools to go and engage with students and they're telling you that, their fathers are the one even having, abusing them right at home. Their cousins are the ones abusing them right at home. Several cases of sexual and gender-based violence as well. So the school can, form that safe space for them. And finally, I would also say that government needs to put needs to put budget to this. We're several years beyond what the UNESCO's recommendation is. We've had several years of deprivation for the girl child, for the boy child who's actually supposed to be in school.
Absolutely.
If anything needs to be done, we should be talking about even double or triple of that budget, just to make sure that we can catch up with global development and we can make sure that we safeguard the the next human capital that the country should have for the next generation.
Thank you, Shola. Great perspectives there. It's now 18 minutes gone to the hour of 1 p.m. and this is WFM 91.7. My name is Chinyere Timothy Crown. We're having a roundtable discussion looking at our democracy after 24 years actually today. And so far, how have we fared as a people, as a country? How have we fared? Were we better off, under the British rule? Or are we better off? Were we better off under the military rule? Are we better off practicing democracy? Is this really what democracy represents? Is this the true nature of democracy? Who should be held accountable? Who is doing what and who is not getting what right? That's what we're talking about. Remember, we talk to learn and we learn to also grow. So we'll take the next question now, and this is directed to Sumbo. The National Bureau Statistical Report on Women and Men in 2021 disclosed that women have continued to record low representation in all tiers and levels of governance. 96% of women who contested during the elections lost out. Is this a lack of political will or government at all levels, though some states like Rivers and Kwara have shown gender sensitivity? We want to see more, especially at the federal level. So what this question is for you. I was having a conversation with my boss this afternoon, and they were talking about, are women subhumans? Are they humans or they are subhumans? So when we see this large haters in women contesting for public office and not coming out as not winning these offices, is it a function of lack of preparation? Is it a function of gender imbalance? Is it a function of she's a woman and she's not competent? Is it a function of being maladroit? Shimo, please help us with this. Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
I'm sorry, I forgot I was muted. I can hear you.
Okay.
Once again, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, I hope you can.
Yes, I can. Did you get the question?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I believe I did. So I was just saying thank you for having me on the panel, and a very good afternoon once again to everyone on the panel discussion this afternoon. Well, the take about women representation. You mentioned a couple of things that could be responsible, and I would like to just say that it's a function of every one of the things that you have mentioned. Well, it's no news to everyone in Nigeria that the female gender has been struggling in the place of having adequate, or maybe I should even say equitable representation in governance in this country, especially when it comes to, the political arena. Now, statistics have shown us that in the past couple of years since we returned to democracy, but the involvement of women in governance at that level has been very, very minimal. Now, the question is, why do we have this situation? I think first and foremost is a function of our socialization as Nigerians. Nigeria is still a very, very patriarchal state, in which case everything gravitates towards the man. And when you have that kind of situation, and then you add religion and culture to it, which is also very much rooted in patriarchy, then you're having a problem of behavioral change. When you have a problem, are you talking? Because I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, ma. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm hearing fluctuations your end. Okay, so I was saying that when you have a problem that has to do with behavioral change, it's a very tough social problem to address. It usually takes a long time. It goes with a lot of advocacy, a lot of education, a lot of sensitization of everyone that is involved. And so that's why we have that problem. Now, when you talk about women representation, in politics, we are looking at other issues such as the perception, that we have, which again is rooted in our socialization. You have in Nigeria, even beyond the political arena, you have a girl in school, she does very well in class. People really don't.
Hello, Sumbo, are you there? Can you hear us? Please unmute your mic, ma'am.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So I was talking about the fact that perception is also another challenge, and that in itself is rooted in culture and our socialization, in which case people don't really acknowledge the capacity and the competence of a woman, in offices, even in terms of education. I was giving that example. You see a girl who tops her class, who does very well. For most of the time, they want to say, oh, she's paying in kind, especially at the tertiary level. So you have that challenge. Now, you also want to look at the terrain in which, we play politics in Nigeria. It's a very dangerous terrain. It's a very violent terrain. Now, if you take a look, for instance, at some of the things that have happened on the Senate floor, in our National Assembly, you've had situations where a fight will break out, and the kind of physical assault that goes on there, you usually would not see a woman getting involved in that in the midst of men. So it's a kind of imbalance, or terrain that we play in. Then you want to look at the peculiarities of a woman in terms of marriage, in terms of family. It's not easy for a woman, to give her all in terms of timing to politics. The question is, who's going to guard the home? Who's going to take care of the home? Usually, with a man, he can just go and he knows that I'm not there. I have someone behind looking at the house, the home front for me. It's not the same with the woman. And of course, a lot has been said about the timing of meetings, that is nocturnal and all of that. How many women living with their husbands would be allowed to go for a nocturnal political meeting at 2 a.m., for instance. It doesn't happen.
Mhm.
We also want to look at education. That is also important because we've been screaming about the girl child education. We find that is also a problem. That it's really the woman, the female, is not a match for the male in terms of opportunities that are available. And of course, you look at the financial capacity. Question is, how many people have had access, the way our male counterpart have I'm very careful about saying it, but it's out there in the public space. We know, that quite a number of the amount of monies that are spent on politics is usually the money that somebody has worked for. How many women have had access to such amounts of money?
All right, so Sumbo, you may have to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
It keeps muting. I'm not touching it. I'm sorry.
So sorry, ma'am.
Okay. So I think I've just tried to run through the situation and the challenges that have made it, that has given rise to the situation that we have the skewed, balance of political representation.
Absolutely.
Now, the question becomes,
go ahead, ma'am.
What do we do to address this issue? Now, there are two kinds of arguments that usually come forth here. You have people who believe that the woman should be given some kind of what's the word now? Some kind of preferences. While some people say to you, look, I'm not looking for preferences in the real sense of the word. But the question is, do I have the capacity? Do I have the competence? Then give me equal opportunity to perform. Now, for me, I would consider it to be a blend of the two.
Okay.
While I would say that, governments should give the woman some form of leverage. And the way I look at that is, if we can do quota system in this country, because we consider some areas, some regions in Nigeria to be disadvantaged in one form or the other. Therefore, we give them some leverage. Okay, you look at the quota system in terms of appointment into the civil service. You look at quota system in terms of admissions into schools, unity schools. And I went to one. I know what we saw there in terms of how do you qualify for admission in terms of marks and all of that. If we can do that, and we can argue the fact that, look, because these people are disadvantaged in this area, let's give them some soft landing. Let's give them some leverage. Why can't we do that in politics and say, look, a woman, because she's a woman and she has all of these disadvantages, let's give her, some form of leverage. Now, they try to do that, political parties try to do that in this last dispensation by saying, okay, if you're a woman, you are contesting for a post, this is the amount you pay. Maybe some said, oh, you get the form free of charge. That's good, but that's not good enough. But at the same time, when we give them these leverages, I also want to say it should also be undergirded by competence and capacity. The truth of the matter is there are many women out there in Nigeria that are making waves. There are many women that I dare say are twice as good as the men. But the question is, what opportunities do they have? So for me, that would basically, be my area of concentration when we talk about political representation in Nigeria.
All right, so it's now 6 minutes to the hour of 1 p.m. and this is WFM 91.7. What are we talking about for the benefit of those who have just joined in? It's Democracy Day, and we're looking at the country, our polity, our policies. So far as a country, are we reaping the benefits of democracy? So, Sumbo, I'll take you on something that you said. You have highlighted a very profound point. You talked about the Machiavellian kind of political system that we run, which in itself, will stymie a woman from attending, nocturnal meetings, and then the nature of our politics is also a precluding factor, you've highlighted a lot of factors that are valid, but there's something I'll need you to talk on, which is a worrying trend, right? We see that women are really shattering the glass ceilings in their different sectors, but we see this trend of women want to alter their bodies. Is this something that they're not, they're not proud of? If you walk the streets of Lagos and you take that statistics, you see more than 6% of women have gone in for surgeries to alter their bodies, to be in the proper form. I don't know how they got that picture of how a woman should look. I don't know if this is being done for themselves or for the male gender. That we there's this lady who's been trending. She's out there cooking to get on the Guinness Book of the Guinness World Record and all that. And then some people are dragging her to say, oh, she's doing this because of her body. So there's a lot of conversation going around a woman's body. Even though I think that being a woman should, transcend beyond the exterior. There's so much that that is deposited in a woman that should be tapped, and not just how she looks. Is this, how did we even get here as a people? I'm speaking to women now because, it's easier to say, oh, they're not giving us opportunities. It is not about being incompetent now, but if we are having that, if we are giving off that posture or that vibe that we are not good enough, don't you think that sometimes that could be a factor that people would look on to say, or latch on rather to say, okay, so you're not competent enough, right?
Oh, I hear you. And again, it's a combination of so many things out there. The generation that we live in is a generation that's been schooled by the social media, and in all of this thing, let's not lose sight of marketing strategies. There are people who are in the businesses of all of these things that you're talking about, and they have a way of marketing their product and putting it out there. That's on the one hand, whether we like it or not, that is a valid situation. Now, on the other hand, is the issue of education. Look, the problem we have in this country is that we often mistake or mix education and literacy. Now, to be literate, it's at the very basest of level is the ability to read and write. You go to school, you learn letters and all of that. But to be educated means not just to be able to read and write, not just to have information, but to be able to interpret the information that you have and then to be able to apply it, to bring out a good outcome.
Right.
So you have a lot of people out there, they are going to school to learn letters. There's no education, because when you look at it, this borders on so many things. Now, the issue also of inferiority complex comes to play. A woman is not confident of herself. A woman is constantly in of people who tend to drag her down. And like I said, on the other hand, you have people who have become social media masters. They direct the conversation. Now, it's the same thing that we have, when we begin to look at Africa and, the West. There's a way that people can communicate and get you to do what they want to do. And if you are not careful, if you are not well educated, well exposed, well, socialized, it's going to be difficult for you. So for me, I think that these are issues that people should begin to talk about. The people who push the negatives seem to have dominated the channels of information.
Absolutely.
More than those who are out there trying to push the positive. So what I would suggest, and I would be talking to the media, because the media has a great role to play, and I'm glad that Jide Johnson is here. Now, how do we begin to use the media, to not just report what is, but to direct the minds of people what ought to be? How do we begin to engage in that regard? Those are the things that we need to look about. Now, when you talk about the fact that is it about the body of a woman, about the content, the truth of the matter, both of them go together. I tell people, if I take a bottle of Coke today, yes, I want to drink the content, but the bottle, the packaging is also something. Any product you want to buy, you start from the packaging. So the truth of the matter is, when women present themselves in a way, they are making a statement out there, and they are making a statement to buyers. in codes. I'm sorry, I'm not using that word in a derogatory manner, but in a manner, but two categories of patronizers, as I say. To one category who are still old school like me, I mean, a woman dresses in a way that is obscene. You have already told me what your content is. And then to another side, maybe that is what is attractive to them. Oh, if she can do this, I want to know what is beyond this. So it's a question of perception, okay, and culture change. And like I said, we've been opened up to the social media, and we are imbibing all kinds of culture. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Right. All right, the numbers to call and rather send your text and WhatsApp message 070-317-56537, 070-317-56537. If you've just joined us, this is WFM 91.7 Women Radio. My name is Chinyere Timothy Crown, and we're having a round panel discussion, drawing, expert discussions from different spectrums of the economy. All right, so we'll go straight to Tanwa now with this question. Tanwa, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has reassured Nigerians about his administration's commitment to ending insecurity in Nigeria. How best can this administration tackle insecurity in Nigeria, as about 78 people have been killed within a week of this administration, coming into power? Now, so in the past, we see that some of these figures are not really accurate, and we see subsisting governments blaming their opponent of being responsible for these figures that we see out there, just to discredit them, again. But the question is, even though you have attempted to answer this question by advising that the subsisting government should employ people who are credible instead of choosing people by maybe party affiliations and all that. Yes, the president has invited service chiefs and spoken to them extensively, and then has told them to hit the ground running. But sometimes we hear some of these meetings without necessarily implementing. We're talking about implementation now. What would you say to the Tinubu administration in terms of implementing some of these consultations?
Yeah, so you're actually very spot on with that. I feel like one of the challenges that we've had as a country has always been the implementation. Now, we have all sorts of commission reports, we have all sorts of recommendation policy reports that are written on how to make things better, but then we're rarely ever able to implement them properly. So that's why I said that thing about leadership is very crucial. If you're going to be able to implement any of these recommendations that have been given that would help curb insecurity, you're going to need strong people who can make those difficult decisions. But I've been around all the different intelligence and security agencies in Nigeria, and I'll tell you this, one of the key challenges that I have seen has been in the area of sort of coordination. Coordination is a major challenge. What that means is that if I get a report about some people who are moving in a specific direction, I will not, and I'm in the army, I will not automatically think that this information needs to be shared as well with the Air Force. This needs to be shared with the local police there. There's just a challenge with that level of coordination amongst the different agencies in terms of sharing the intel that they get in a proper manner that will be useful down to the tactical level, so which is the men and the boots on the ground. So if we can get that coordination right, I think it will be key. How do you get coordination right? Again, there's this saying, you cannot give what you don't have. You cannot simply keep putting people in these positions who do not have the sense, do not have the skill sets and the capabilities for that. Now, the other thing too is, even in the area of intelligence management, you'll be surprised that some of the high level sort of intel meetings that they have amongst the leadership of the intelligence agencies, these meetings, they go in there and end up talking about very tactical level things, who stole what, and who was arrested for something. Whereas when you're talking about high level personalities like that coming together, they are supposed to be talking about the strategic security direction. They're supposed to provide direction. What is the intelligence requirement? What are our knowledge gaps? What is it that we don't know? What is it that we need to know? And then they provide that direction. then the staff, the senior management take that direction that's given to them, and they're able to run with that. They're able to collect intelligence based on the objectives, which are the intelligence requirements given by the leadership, and then they're able to analyze them effectively. There's been challenges in the area of analysis as well. Sometimes you have personnel, right, analysts within these organizations that are not necessarily skilled in that practice. So again, a lot of capacity building can help get there, but it also helps when you just hire the right people to begin with. So it just makes things easier. And then finally, disseminating that information. Once you get that crucial intel, are you sharing it with the right personalities? Are you making sure that they get it right on time? But I think there's also one major challenge that we've had, and that's in the area of emergency management across the country. What that means is, if there is an attack right now in a community in Benue State, ideally this community should be able to dial 112, 911, whatever the case may be, 3-digit easy number they can remember under duress. Call that number and say, I'm in XYZ community, we're under attack right now. And ideally, in an ideal situation, there should be immediate response. There should be a nearby law enforcement post or something that can immediately respond to that emergency. This process of emergency management on that granular community level is lacking in many, many parts of Nigeria. We call them ungoverned spaces, or some people say there's no such thing, it's just poorly governed. Whatever moniker they want to use for that, it doesn't matter. Bottom line is that I think it's time for us to go down to that community level, figure out what communities have the ability to respond to emergencies. If they don't have that infrastructure in place, it needs to be set up. What that also means is that if you're saying, look, we don't have enough policemen that can do this, then let's look at the young men within that community. Are we able to sort of, put ourselves together, organize ourselves as a community, hire some young people here, get them sort of to be a part of the police. So let the police know, look, these men are also under you. Let them just be your eyes and ears on our community level, so that if anything happens, if they arrest the culprits, we can bring them over to the police, etc. So this is also what we call, community policing. Really, policing needs to be decentralized to that level. I do have some hope that this administration will be able to do that. Not every state might be ready for this. And I think that we should go based on the ones that are ready to put this infrastructure in place, then allow them to. The ones that are not, we can still augment them with the federal police structure. I think this administration might be willing to decentralize policing, set up these community level policing structures as well, similar to what has been done already in Lagos State with the Lagos State Neighborhood Watch and the neighborhood corps, and also even in terms of how they equipped the RRS, the Rapid Response Squad. So RRS in Lagos State is really heavily funded by the state government, and they're able to respond to these sort of emergencies like I spoke about earlier. So, again, the challenges that we're going through in the area of security in Nigeria is not unique. We're not the only ones. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? All these challenges have existed right from time. It's just a matter of, do we have the willing leadership that is willing to make those difficult decisions and is willing to see the change happen? And hopefully, I'm very hopeful, I'm trying to stay very hopeful about this. Hopefully we do have that here and start seeing concrete changes in the area of insecurity.
Great perspective there, Tawal. Thank you so much for that perspective. 070-317-56537, the numbers to send your messages and your WhatsApp messages to contribute and give your perspectives on the program today. All right, so we'll move to Jonathan now. This particular one is been, I'll say, shrouded in a lot of secrecy, and that's the issue of subsidy removal. There's been a lot of yo-yo back and forth talk about, okay, it was the President Buhari's administration that removed subsidy, not the subsisting government that removed subsidy. But something beats my mind, because previous years back, we saw the integration, the promise from the vice president, about the integration of artisanal and modular refinery operators into mainstream oil and gas sectors to boost local content. If we take figures of how much has gone into this fuel subsidy, it is more than what was used to build the Dangote refinery, if data is anything to go by. Jonathan, do you have any fidelity in this administration that something positive will come out of this entire, fuel subsidy narrative?
Okay. So I think your question actually is really a question of my thoughts, or if I believe rather. So I think I will work on the basis of what I've seen so far. But before I get to speak to that again, I just wanted to say that I hold a strong view, and I think it's actually the right position that subsidy removal is the way to go for sustainability, and also from the reality that we see that really we have a problem with how we prioritize what we do with the revenues we generate. And clearly it doesn't make sense that the meager resources that we generate, or even the way we go about generating it sometimes, because there are instruments we use for even utilizing some of the for generating some of the revenues that we've been using to fund the budgets here. But I think it's the way to go. And I think that there's really a new slate and a new opportunity for this government to really earn the trust of the people. I think there are lots of reports. IMF has done a very extensive reports, even some of the top consulting companies in the country, KPMG, PwC, even recently I was reading Deloitte's reports, all backing the decision and just affirming what has been shared previously, that the economics around sustaining subsidy just doesn't make any sense and only benefits just a few people rather than the totality or the majority of the country. I think that we can only give a benefit of doubt to what we see with the new government. I think everybody agrees that they're barely 2 weeks old today, actually. And so from the steps they've taken, and also the things that were listed in the inaugural speech, and also some of the things that were also confirmed today in the president's address to the nation today, I think that we can only give him a benefit of a doubt to see what will happen. And what really will happen is that we are looking at a redirection of where the funds that should have gone into payment of subsidies now going to critical parts of the economy. And I'm sure that we all agree that there are parts of the economy, it has been stated. I mean, I've heard education on this conversation as well. We've heard about the fight against insecurity. So there are parts of our economic activities and our national activities where we could do a bit more with funding, and also see the results and how it affects, the ordinary Nigerian. So let's be optimistic. This is a clean slate. I think one of the things about Nigeria sometimes is that Nigerians can be quite patient when we believe that our leaders will take the right action. So I think there's a sense that this is the way to go. Even some of the opposition parties have come out, some of their members, to say this is the right direction. And it was also a fact that all the major political actors for the post of the presidency, or contenders for the post of the presidency, did actually say that this is the way to go. So I think it's a majority view that this is the way to go. Let's watch and see. I think we will give the benefit of that to see maybe by this time next year how much faith and how much of the benefit of that we've given has actually translated into positive dividends for us. But I think it's the way to go, and let's be hopeful. We can only be hopeful, and let's latch into that. And the president did ask for a lot of sacrifice from everyone today in his speech today.
All right, thank you so much, Jonathan. All right, so you're listening to WFM 91.7 Women Radio. My name is Chinyere Timothy Crown, and we're having a panel discussion looking at democracy so far as a nation. How have we fared? Let's go straight to Dr. Jide Johnson with this question now. There's been the current approach by the government, the new government, to alleviate the sufferings of the masses, because owing to the subsidy removal has been shrugged off as pejorative, so to speak, as insensitive in some quarters. That is, Dr. Jide Johnson, give us your 2 cents, as to what the best approach the current administration should adopt. Some are saying that they should partner with the Dangote refinery, because just asking civil servants to come to work 3 times a week, it looks like a short-term approach. That's not enough, because you have to consider full spectrum. Not everyone works for government. If you're saying civil servants should come to work three times a week, how about people who work for private organizations who are also grossly affected with the removal of fuel subsidy? Dr. Jide Johnson, what's the cure-all? What's that panacea? What's that elixir that you would advise this government to adopt as a long-term approach to, pacifying, so to speak, the current situation?
The basic issue is the Human Development Index. And how do you measure the Human Development Index? You look at the standard of living and the cost of living. I think what the government needs to do is to reduce the cost of living and improve the standard of living of an average Nigerian. And how do you do that? You have to combat inflation and reduce the number of wastages you have in government and corruption in government. Does the government have the will and the capacity to do it? Well, we've seen that the government has demonstrated the will first by removing petroleum subsidy. Now we are now waiting for the capacity. The capacity is to prosecute all those that have one way or the other enrich themselves through corrupt practices, denying Nigerians the opportunity of enjoying the benefits and the deliverables of democracy for the past 24 years. That's where the capacity comes in. And then the government, beyond rhetorics, beyond the numbers, I think what the government needs to do is to make direct investment in the agricultural sector. Some of the subsidy we have used for the petroleum product, I think we should invest into the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector, because the basis of development starts with a nation feeding itself. Now, if we improve our capacity to feed ourselves without relying on importing commodity produce outside of Nigeria, then we are taking the first step towards economic emancipation, towards improving the standard of living and reducing the cost of living. Now, these are the areas in which the government needs to look at. Now, in the last 8 years, Buhari administration spoke about investing money in infrastructure. People do not eat infrastructure. And one of the major areas in which the president, in his speech today, he also spoke about infrastructure. I think there's the need for a redirection. A redirection in the sense that beyond infrastructure, there's the need for us to have food security. Once you have food security, then the issue of national security, the issue of economic security is dealt with practically. A lot of people can't make their ends meet in view of current realities. One, we have double-digit inflation. Two, the Naira exchange rate is not comparable to other currency globally, and that itself has a direct impact on their cost of living. So, as far as I'm concerned, the government should make investment in the agricultural sector. The government should look at how and ways of improving standard of living and reducing cost of living. And it requires capacity and will. And that can be done if you reduce wastages in government. I hope that we now have the number of ministers and aides that we had in the last administration across the state. If you look at the vehicles recovered from some state governors by their successor, you wonder where did they get the resources to purchase those exotic vehicles and use those exotic vehicles as official car in the face of dwindling poverty and poor economic situation of the citizenry across the length and breadth of this country. These are areas in which I think that government should look into, reduce cost of governance, invest in agriculture, and then fight corruption decisively. And then we begin to talk about improvement in the lives of an average Nigerian. And then people begin to see the reality that they are beginning to see that there is hope. And don't forget that this government came in with renewed hope. And they need to take actions and decisions that will renew the hopelessness. I rekindle the hope of Nigerians in the hopelessness they have with respect to what governance has been in the last 24 years.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Judy Johnson, for that great perspective there. We'll go straight to Shobo with this question. We see that the Tinubu administration, the posture of Tinubu administration is suggesting that, he will have an all-inclusive, arena for women. He has said so categorically in his inaugural speech. But are there preparations, because it's one thing to have opportunities, another thing to be ready for that opportunity. Are there preparations that you would suggest or advise women to take on so that they can, really, be at one ment with these opportunities that are opening up with the new administration?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch you. I didn't quite catch that question. Could you please repeat it?
Okay, so I said the current administration has made promises to include women in this administration, even though we've had such promises in the past. We want to give this one the benefit of the doubt. As a woman leader, what advice would you give to women to prepare themselves for these opportunities? Because it's one thing to have an opportunity, it's another thing to be ready for that opportunity.
Yeah, you're right. The readiness for the opportunity is very, very critical. I would expect that women who play in the field of politics, women who, like you said, have broken the glass ceilings in their different professional, spaces. I think this is the time to begin to come together and to begin to look through ourselves. Who is that woman that we can put forward for what position, for what portfolio? And the moment we are able to come together, united, form a team, which I think men are better at doing, we have a constituency and we can say, okay, this is going on now. These are the list of people that we feel confident in, that we are ready to, give the opportunity or push into the opportunity. I think that is very, very important for us, so that we also don't fall into a space whereby they just pick people arbitrarily, and then we have people who don't have the competence. We've been shouting competence, character, capacity, and all of that. And I think that sometimes somewhere somebody added the word calories, and that kind of trips me. You have the physical the physical stature for it. Do you have the emotional intelligence? Do you have the competence in terms of the subject matter itself? So we need to begin to scout amongst ourselves and make that representation. I think that is very important. Now, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, there are also key offices that I believe that, peradventure, are better manned by a woman. Not necessarily that they are better, in terms of competence to their male counterpart, but because he who feels it knows it. This is the space in which we operate. So I would be looking at health. For instance, the issue of health in Nigeria is very critical for the woman. The issue of education is also very critical for the woman, because when things fall apart in these two areas, it is the women that first and foremost bear the brunt. So I will be looking at such spaces, for women to come in.
All right. Thank you so much, Sumbo, for that great perspective there. For want of time, let's go straight to Shola to give his final thoughts on how, we can progress as a nation, as a country. It's not enough to, we have spoken and spoken. If there's a word that's spoken, and spoken about the challenges that we are facing as a country. It is not enough to dwell in the doldrums. It is not enough to remain in this quandary. How do we get ourselves out? Which I think, in my estimation, is not just the responsibility of government, but also the responsibility as citizens. Shola, let's have your 2 cents in one sentence.
Okay, so I strongly feel that Nigerians are not asking for too much. We just yearn for a beautiful country. We yearn for a great country. We want to see all those stories that have been told in the past relieved. We want to see those good old days, back, if not even much better with, the advancements we've seen in terms of technology. However, I think one of the things we need to do is also hold ourselves accountable, not believe that all of these things would happen by magic. While we point, several fingers at government to say that government is not doing this or that, there's also still the other component that has the fact that citizens have things that they need to do themselves, hold themselves accountable. Again, we also need to, have governments actually ensure that citizens can actually trust them. Government, you get to hear a lot of things. The various institutions of government have to be fixed, starting with the ones we interact with on a daily basis, starting with the police. That's that index that shows, several of the most corrupt institutions in the country. The police is always on the top of that. And that is one institution that interacts with, several citizenry, the citizenry on a daily basis. So if we have some of these, changes and reforms in some of these places, I think there will be good pointers to the fact that, look, something big is in the offing for Nigerians.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shola. All right, so let's go to Jide Johnson finally on the panel today. Jide Johnson, the National Assembly has been this arm that is, that's been a lot of brouhaha, and it's also saddled with a lot of responsibility, because sometimes we hear that the president has a goodwill, but it's been frustrated by the National Assembly. What's your expectations? What are your expectations of the 10th National Assembly in the area of policy making and working with the president to ensure that Nigerians are delivered the dividends of democracy? Jide Johnson, are you there? Can you please unmute your mic? All right, so let's take that to Jonathan. Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can very well.
Did you get the question?
Please pose the question again.
Okay, so for want of time, right? What are your expectations from this administration? In spite of, what people are saying, what some people are saying, that this administration might just be an extension of the last order, of the former order. What are your expectations?
I think for me, and I thought I heard was it Shola make the same point. I think we're not asking for a lot. And I really would want the government to just focus on those things that really just speaks to an average Nigerian, things like basic power supply. I mean, the part of Lagos where I stay, I've actually had uninterrupted power supply for about 3 days, but I can't say the same across the country. But I think simple things like that, just basic, regular power supply, Nigerians will all be united in that sort of expectation. Things like improving access to even healthcare at the very basic levels. There are some bigger issues that I wish we could have spoken to, but maybe we can always have that conversation around even the death of personnel as well too, right? But I think even simple things like access to healthcare, I think that's somewhere that it will be very, very good to see the government do a lot for us in that direction. Sustaining the work that is going on around infrastructure. There's been a lot of massive work that has happened on real road infrastructure, just sustaining it, stretching that, as well. So I think we'll be happy about that. Dealing with issues around our educational sector, I think so. So I just want to say just the basic, simple things for lack of time.
Right.
We'll be happy to have that.
Right. It's been an empowering conversation here on WFM 91.7 Women Radio. Today is Democracy Day, and we are looking at how we have fared as a country for the past 24 years. It's been quite an incisive, conversation, and we want to sincerely thank all our panelists. Shola Fagorosi is the Executive Director, One Life Initiative. We had Tanwa Ashiru, CEO, Bulwark Intelligence Solutions. Dr. Jide Johnson, Director, Special Program, Nigerian Institute of Journalism. We had Sumbo Oladipo, Social and Public Affairs Analyst. And also Jonathan, the last but not the least, Jonathan Ikeolumba, Founder, Office Lord Consulting, Finance and Strategy Consultant. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. Thank you to the Executive Producer, Ton Okewale Shonaya, and thanks to the production team of Blessing Agbeyeton, Rose Yusuf Kesa, and Esther Alaribi for putting this together. Thanks to Elizabeth Abo and the engineers on duty for visibility and technical support. I'm Chinyere Timothy Crown. Happy Democracy Day. God bless Nigeria.